Okay.
Well, hello, Norm. What a lovely occasion to see you again.
Hi, Martin. Greetings from the last Wild West town in America, Reno, Nevada.
That's
Haven't seen you since you played here. Delightfully, I might add.
November. Thank you. After I left, I listened to this podcast about Reno. It was a, I think, 7-part podcast, and it was fascinating. The history of town and the old Reno and new Reno, the
Oh,
Reno
yes.
casinos and the Reno of Tesla Gigafactory and all that. Fascinating place.
Yes, we're still the last Wild West town in America. And Halifax, Nova Scotia might be pushing us off stage these days, but we'll get back. Let me introduce myself for the audience.
I was about to ask you to please do so.
Okay. My name is Norm Robbins. I am the theater critic for RenoArts.news, which is the premier online magazine dedicated solely to the arts. And I interviewed Martin a while ago, found it fascinating. He's a very knowledgeable man. And I found the interview fascinating. And he sent me a link to his 2 tutorials on YouTube. One was on the second movement, I believe, of Dvorak's 8th Symphony.
Indeed.
And the other one was on Mars, Holst's. It's hard to say all those consonants without a vowel between them.
Trust me, that's why I had to restart.
Mars, the bringer of war.
I had to restart that video several times because I couldn't say Holst's the planets.
Okay, so we're starting again?
No. I mean, when I was doing the original presentation, it gave me a hard time.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
So you sent me an email and said, this begs so many questions, and
yes.
why are certain things certain way? And I got intrigued. You're such probing way. You've probing questions. They are not on surface. So that's why we're talking today.
Thank you, sir. You flatter me. Anyhow, what I did that I doubt any of your listeners did was during the performance, during your tutorial, it wasn't a performance that you were short on brass and timpani with only a piano. But I took my pulse and I said, this is inducing a sense of fight or flight in me.
Yeah.
And fight or flight means that your heart rate increases to get more blood where you need it. Your arteries close down thanks to adrenal excretions. Your arteries close down so as to preserve blood when you're wounded. But I checked my pulse and my mind said, boy, this is fight or flight. This is scary stuff. This is frightful stuff. But my pulse said, my pulse was normal all through the performance, both yours and actual performances. So that's one of my questions. How does Holst, or anybody else for that matter, give me a sense of fight or flight? What do they do? You talked about basso ostinato,
yes,
which is one of the things I knew before you told me about it. I didn't know other ostinatos. So why is a basso ostinato, a bass, an obstinate bass, why is an obstinate bass more frightening than another obstinate whatever?
Yeah. Well, let me just say, there's actually, you can say there are 2 types of ostinatos. One is just rhythmic, taradam, pam, pa, pa, pam. Yeah, that's just the rhythm. Or it could be harmonic and rhythmic at the same time. So that's when the harmony is unchanged. And you could even say, for example, Passacaglia, an old Renaissance form that has certain structure. It goes in 3, and you have one harmony on the first 2 beats and the second harmony on the 3rd beat, and it just goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, and the harmony is unchanged. Even that is an ostinato. So I think that something that having an unchanging structure in music is unnatural to us. Although one could argue that pop music is, relatively unchanging, but even there you have verse and refrain, and we expect that to happen. We expect changes, but there is something that is not that as you said, makes us go on alert when we hear a very mechanistic sound, repeated sound. It's just an interesting psychological device, and the composers exploited it to their fullest. And I think you can create the sense of foreboding of something, something dooming coming your way, but you can also create a different kind of expectation, a pleasant expectation, maybe even an exhilaration. I would submit Ravel's Bolero for that. That's an ostinato piece, right? But you don't feel threatened. You just you get fuller and fuller with joy.
Yes, but Ravel's Bolero, I think, might be boring because it's so repetitive. But when you realize it was ballet music, and then when you see a professional ballet company perform that, you think, wow, this is amazing stuff, because it ends up in a frenzy.
Yes. Well, to me, it's a orchestrational, phenomenally orchestrated piece. But really, the highlight of the piece is when Ravel changes the harmony, right? It just drops by a third. And so you've been listening to it for, what is it? I don't know, feels like half an hour. It's probably 15 minutes or so. And then finally, when everyone's playing, the harmony finally changes. And it's such a revelation, because we were all waiting for it for so long.
Let's go back to my pulse for a minute.
Okay.
Excuse me. In theater, theater is predicated on believable unreality. If you and I are doing a gunfight at the OK Corral in a play, and you shoot me, nobody's going to call the police. They know it's not real.
That's right.
But it's believable. Why did you shoot me, you terrible man? So I think in music you do believable unreality, which is why my mind believed the basso ostinato, and my body sort of sloughed it off and ignored it. Let's talk about opera for a minute.
There's a cognitive dissonance there. Yes, your body knows that nothing's terrible is happening, but your mind is fully engaged. And the fact that music is abstract actually adds to it. It's as if, when you're reading a book or seeing a movie, so most people would agree that there are notable exceptions, but the books create a deeper impact because we create those images in us. And that's the same with music, right? I mean, we give you a very abstract we just give you an abstract feeling, and in your mind you just shape it to the form that you find best, most impactful.
Yes. Now let's go to a taxonomy that I find confusing. One of my favorite operas is Rigoletto. I've been listening to it since I was 18 years old.
That's probably why I like you, because I love Rigoletto.
Bless you. Thank you. So, the protagonist, well, not the protagonist, but the romantic part is played by is the Duke of Mantua, who is an industrial strength, no-goodnik, and serial womanizer.
Yeah.
Awful guy.
Awful, but charming.
Pardon me?
But charming.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's it. Charming. Bella Figlia dell'amore, beautiful daughter of love. Oh, give me a break.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so he's a tenor. Gilda, his love interest, is obviously a soprano, and her father is a baritone, Rigoletto. And the baritone seems to come off as firm but fair.
Yeah.
And my personal hero in the opera is Sparafuccio,
Yeah.
the assassin.
Chile, yeah.
Lovable guy. He's a bassist. He's
Of
a
course
bass.
he's the bass, yeah.
Okay. Now, could you imagine a tenor playing Sparafuccio?
See, I don't think it's completely out of question, but it would be so much harder to convince to the audience.
There you go. To make that unreality believable.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would be an interesting challenge to play with these stereotypes and write an opera where the tenor would be the bad guy and the bass would be the lover. I think we're really stretching it, even with the best composers.
Yes.
Just something about human nature. This is just, we slip into comfy shoes with those characters.
So my question is, why this taxonomy? I mean, as a bass, I'm very happy about that, that I can go around scaring people. But why that taxonomy? What is it about us human beings that make baritones fatherly, tenors people in love, and basses sometimes really evil guys?
Yeah, I never thought about it before you asked me that question in the email, and I'm no expert, and I don't know if there is one single answer, but I started thinking how natural. I started thinking about natural sounds, a sound of a storm. You know, it's always a deep rumble, or animals that can attack and eat you. You know, mosquitoes are.
Yes.
You know, we feel like we can fight a mosquito, right? You can wave it off, but not a bear or a tiger, and or a lion. And so maybe some of this, that's probably the rumbling. The rumbling is a storm, or it's an earthquake. You know, there's a lot of negative connotations.
Yes.
I think it goes back to the prehistoric times, how we're wired.
I think so, because animals are like that. When a dog is injured, it yelps. When it wants to be, when it's in danger, it bares its teeth and it growls.
Yeah.
When you speak to a young child, a baby, you know, you tend to speak in a falsetto. Hi, honey, how are you today?
Yeah.
And if somebody irritates you and you want them to back off, you say, okay, enough. You know, your voice deepens, and that lets you know, that lets the other person know that you're serious.
I would also say there's another aspect that I just thought of, that when you said that these deeper voices are paternal or voices of wisdom, right?
Yes.
Arastro in the Magic Flute. And when you think about it musically, you have a note and then you have the series of harmonics on top of it. So the low is always the foundation upon which everything is built, right? That's everything is an embellishment. So the guidance, the wisdom, the depth, the core comes always from down below.
Yes, that's interesting. When I was in the Air Force, we didn't do a lot of marching, but during basic training, we marched. During tech school, photo intelligence school that I went to, we marched to the school from our barracks, and then back we marched. I can't imagine marching in 5/4 time.
That's right. But that in that video, I think that makes it so otherworldly. It's really weird.
There you go.
It does feel like a march, but there's something wrong with that march. It's not a march of human beings, because we all have two legs, right?
I forgot the term that you applied to it, but I think you said limpy or something like that.
Yeah, limping. Yeah. Or the Martian creatures have five legs.
Yes.
Or one of their legs is shorter than the other. Something's wrong with that Martian army.
No, people with one short leg are 4F. They don't go in. but the 5/4 meter seems to work in that it's threatening.
Yes. Well, it's also inherently unstable, right? So
you've got it.
On one hand, you have there's the strictness of the rhythm, right? That doesn't.
Yes.
To me, the tempo should not change. There's some conductors that would disagree, but most would agree that it's one tempo, and that creates that really dramatic impact. But within that context of unchanging, of completely unchanging picture, you have this moment of instability, the 3+2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Shakespeare used the term in Julius Caesar and in other plays, cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war.
Mm.
Most people don't know what that means. When a commander cried havoc, that was the signal to let all civilized warfare go. Turn yourself into a dog. Take no prisoners, bayonet the wounded, rape, loot. You are totally unconstrained. And when I hear that 5/4 meter, that's what I think of. Something totally unconstrained by any civilized rules of war. Take no prisoners, bayonet the wounded. That's what comes to mind.
That's a very good observation. I agree with you. And then the contrast, the second movement is Venus, a bringer of peace. And
yes.
Now you have soothing, cajoling music, calming, and it's, of course, he was a good composer, so that's why he created this juxtaposition. If he put Jupiter after Mars, that's very jovial, the effect would be diminished, right?
Yes.
Or maybe, I think it's a fantastic pairing there.
Now, in theater, there's a standard format for writing drama. You start off introducing some people. Excuse me, I've got a little bit of phlegm in my throat. You start off introducing people.
You start with secondary characters, right? I mean, that's
yeah. You introduce the characters,
yeah.
and you introduce a little bit of tension, and the tension builds. And traditionally, if there was 1 act, 2 acts, 3 acts, Act 1 introduces the characters, builds just a slight amount of tension. Act 2 builds the tension up to a crescendo, and then Act 3 is the denouement, which is the resolution, where all the loose ends are tied up, and all the theater goers leave the theater having had an experience, maybe even having been changed by the experience, but leaving a happy crowd. The denouement tied up all the loose ends. Holst does not do that in Mars. He starts off violent, he ends violent, and I thought, where's the denouement? And the answer is, it's in Venus.
Yes, indeed. Holst was very unhappy when people performed his suite, The Planets, only partially, 3 or 4 movements, although on occasion he also succumbed to that. I don't know if it was how large the paycheck was, or he probably just wanted his music to be heard. But and he also really did not like when people messed with the order. People often would change the order so the suite ended on a happy note.
Yes.
He wanted it to end with Neptune, with a very kind of cold and distant sound that's disappearing. He said, because it's just like life. Life is not nice and not fair. It's interesting that but that was his take on it. He certainly had a very, and the why the order is the way it is. There's several competing explanations for that, but musically, I think it makes all great sense. You have Jupiter in the middle, the biggest chunk of the piece, and then when you sort of go to the outer movements, they create nice pairings, and the mood is unique to each movement. So,
did he do a portion on Saturn?
Yes, he did. Saturn, bringer of old age. So this must have to do with astrology, which I happily say I'm not versed in, but that sounds weary and tired. He mostly uses deep sonorities, a lot of trombones and bassoons and cellos, basses, and it kind of drags. But
I have a suggestion for you. if he really knew what was happening, he would have told us that the rings of Saturn are comprised of lost airline luggage. Perhaps that will resonate with you, being a bi-coastal conductor. Okay.
I have to admit, the other day I saw a plane taking off from an airport here, and I kind of missed being on it. You know, I mean, it's always too much when you're doing it, but when all of a sudden you're completely cut off,
Yes.
I started missing it.
Yes.
Really, I like flying because I get lots of stuff done because I don't buy internet connection. So for once, I am in my seat for hours. That's where I do my best reading because out of necessity, nothing distracts me.
I spent 6 years in Southeast Asia, and the flights between there and the United States, especially New York, were long. But I loved them, and you must too, because you can't do anything in the present, and the future hasn't come yet.
Yes.
So you're at peace. You can read, you can listen to music, you can do whatever.
Think.
I have a suggestion for you on Holst. Early on in the history of American theater, there was a lady named Stella Adler who was one of the ones who brought Stanislavski's method acting to the United States. And she used to teach her acting students something very short that I love. Life beats down and crushes the soul. Art teaches you that you have one. Now, I suspect, being a writer and a little bit of a pain in the glutei about what's published of mine and what's edited, that Holst, this came out of Holst's soul. And I think if you change a comma, an iota, anything, you're messing with his soul, and he doesn't like that.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Although he grumbled later in life that this piece that became so popular eclipsed other music that he wrote.
Yes.
But it's an inspired piece, and he was fairly young still. It's interesting to look at how many of these novel or revolutionary works were written by young composers. You know, composers in their late 20s, early 30s.
Yes.
It's like with, but even, you know, I'm reading a book on quantum theory, and it goes through the history. Starts, you know, well, it talks about Einstein first, and about all these pivotal moments and the most important personalities in the quantum theory. And they were all young people. They were, when they came up with these breakthroughs, they were usually in their late 20s or maybe 30s. It's just amazing. Then we sort of slip into our patterns, and it's so much harder to come up with something, some truly original angle.
Yes. Physicists did their great work very young, their greatest work very young, and mathematicians even younger. So
and it probably also has to do with your brain being still very fresh, right?
Probably. And we'll get to that in a second. But I just wanted to comment about your comments on astrology that I loved.
Thank you.
But we were talking about where we're going with this coronavirus. When we'll be free of it. And that involves economic forecasting. And an economics professor one time said, economic forecasting was invented to make astrology look respectable. So I'm in total accord with you on that. Now,
thank you for that, Bomo. That was
you might want to, if you haven't read it already, you might want to read a book by Thomas Kuhn, Kuhn, called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Are you familiar with it?
I am not. I'll write it down.
Okay, he was a physicist, and he wrote this book well over 50 years ago. And at the risk of sounding like an old duffer, I read it when it was freshly published. And I had cause to tell a doctor about it, a medical doctor, because he was doing something revolutionary and his peers didn't like it for any number of reasons. So I sent him a copy of the book, but they had published the 50th anniversary edition. So I thought, well, it's been half a century. It's I remember a little bit of it, but not that much. So I read it again. And one of the things Kuhn said was, science advances funeral by funeral. and he talked about, he introduced the word paradigm. And we all use the word paradigm, but we use it in a very sloppy, loose sense. But what he said was paradigm was essentially an idea with an entire establishment built around it. So, for example, this doc was a plastic surgeon who was working in neurology, nerves, brain, what have you.
Yes.
And the neurologist didn't like it because he came up with it first. I would imagine you see that in music. You certainly see it in theater. You see it everywhere. That Beethoven's music, for example, has an establishment. And if you come up with German expressionism, which to me is the result of two hideous world wars and a depression, no wonder they're depressed. I don't particularly like German expressionism because I'm not European. I am Native American. I've lived here all my life, except when I lived overseas. That's not my experience. We have never had an invasion except a failed invasion on an Aleutian island by the Japan Imperial Army.
Yeah.
But so I would imagine that expressionism was not well received by people who liked the classics at the time. Is that true?
I would say there's certainly a lot of people who will only like that kind of music and scorn at the music of the previous centuries. Beethoven usually gets a pass, but the romantic music is often attacked. I'll tell you, I don't trust anyone who excludes the entire style of writing music. I agree with you that I'm not going to wake up and listen to expressionistic music all the time, but even there you find gems if you look hard enough. So, and I always thought of this as a challenge. When in my programming, I always look for something I haven't done. Oh, have I done French music from 1810s? No, let's do it. Let's try to, always expand your horizons. I think that's more fun than finding your corner and then defend it and put blinders on. That's, but I like how we brought it back to music, and full circle. And it's interesting how this music, as you said, for example, expressionistic music, there's a sense of foreboding, just like in Mars. There's something in the air, and the creative people, often the really creative people, geniuses, they can capture that feeling. And that's why also I like to commission works these days, because I want to sort of learn what our world is. We also leave it for later generations, but it's good. It's a good reflection of us. Some of these things or most of it is probably happening on subconscious level, but it's really interesting how art often sort of precedes the events in real life.
Well, you and I are both amateur historians a little bit.
Yes.
We know in World War I, in the Battle of the Somme, 2 million people died. Yeah. And the real estate that changed hands was a couple of yards. In World War II, 50 million people died, 20 million in Europe, 50 million were made permanently homeless. In the Depression, excuse my economic background, that was caused by government. In our country, it was caused by a government that said, gee, our income is going down, so let's raise taxes and let's tighten the money supply and let's pass the Smoot-Hawley law that protects our workers. And then Europeans retaliated and world trade died. So for example, Milton Friedman, very famous economist, passed away a while ago. He was, in 1932, he was an economics student, and he studied economics because he couldn't understand, on one side of the street, there was a factory whose owner wanted to open, but it was closed. And on the other side of the street, there were workers in line for a bowl of soup or a hunk of bread. Why is it that they want to work and they want you to work and they couldn't get together?
Yeah.
So with Europe's experience, it's no wonder that their music and their theater, I suspect, is different from ours.
Yeah, I agree.
It's no wonder.
So a trivia question for you. Everything changed in the First World War and Second World War. The map of Europe definitely looks completely different. One country looks exactly the same throughout the century. Switzerland, where the banks are.
Yes.
Everyone needs to deposit the money.
Well, it's very hard to invade Switzerland. I mean, it's not the Czech Republic east of the mountains. It's, it's not flat land.
That's right.
Anyhow,
well,
I think I have a great education under my belt now.
This is delightful.
Martin,
just like a previous conversation, we veer off and we visit all these different places, and that's what I love. I can never know where we're gonna go with our conversations. It's just a delight.
Except, we are going to go somewhere interesting.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Norm, it's good to see that you are alive and well.
And you too. Yeah, I mean, maybe we're just too mean and nasty to die. Who knows? Good people go.
Thank you for the laugh, and thank you for your time. This has been really wonderful.
Great talking with you. Bye.
Goodbye.